Well, it's been incredible the past year, and after 6 months in Rojava fighting alongside the YPG, I knew that was only going to be half the battle. Actually, coming home and talking about my experiences is what the YPG needs, to have that voice, to actually have an impartial voice as well, to go to the UK, go back to America at some point as well, and just articulate the message in a way that people could understand in the West.
And have you been doing that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's well, where do I begin? I've been writing articles, the Daily Mail, the Daily Telegraph, the Guardian, the Jerusalem Post. I did a documentary as well. I've got another documentary planned. I was able to travel to Switzerland to raise money for the different projects that I've got going, one of which is to supply medical packs to the front line. I was able to lobby Parliament, meet numerous very senior members of the Conservative Party and the British government as well. I was able to travel to America, where I was able to lobby Congress.
I'm interested to sort of stop you and ask you about your visits to this to the club.
The Carlton Club.
The Carlton Club.
Yeah, sure.
What were the conversations like in the Carlton Club?
Well, it was very interesting, and I can't say any particular names, but people who are very supportive within the Conservative Party. I have a background in the Conservative Party, and one of the things that I like to do is I want to show there's common ground everywhere with the YPG and with the people of Rojava. There's common ground amongst the Labour Party, the Conservative Party, the Lib Dems, everyone. Everyone should believe in democracy. Everyone should believe in the same values that the YPG does. And they do. So when I was sitting down with MPs in the Carlton Club, a lot of them needed educating. They wanted to know what the YPG stood for, what the people of Rojava wanted. So I was able to articulate that. I was able to tell them a little bit more about what I did when I was there as well, and what I needed from them, and what they could be doing in Parliament to speak out for the Kurds. There is a lot of them are, at the moment there is government policy and there's individual opinion, I suppose, and there's a lot of them who don't really want to express it publicly. But the beautiful thing is the support is there, and it will come out in the future as well, particularly as we start lobbying the government more directly, and as the government starts to realise we can't just ignore the YPG and the solutions that the revolution in Rojava is offering, not just to that particular region, just to the Kurds and just to Rojava, but to all of Syria. So yeah, it's some very, very positive things have been happening over the past few months.
And you went to America?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, America, I spent a long time in New York. I actually didn't get all the way down to Washington. I did speak to a couple of congressmen. I say congress people because there's women as well. I did a lot of interviews. Every other day I was in the CBS building, not just to speak to CBS, but to other groups as well that were interviewing me through their facilities. Articles as well. I was able to speak at the City University of New York. I was able to meet a number of different activists out there as well. They're doing some wonderful things there. I mean, they want to unite the Kurdish voices in Canada and America together to help raise funding together, to lobby together as well. Because one of the problems in Syria, I suppose, not just amongst Kurds, is sometimes people are pulling in different directions. Yeah. What's amazing is when actually start uniting together and actually start pooling resources and actually coming up with coherent plans that's going to advance the cause. And they understand that, and they're doing it now, which was great to see. So yeah, the American trip was great.
You mentioned Canada, and there was one of the YPG fighters, a Canadian volunteer, John Gallagher, recently fell fighting in one of the last operations. And I was speaking to somebody who recently told me that how he died. He was shot in the upper thigh, and he bled to death. I know that it's something that's very close to your projects is trying to get medical packs to the fighters. Have you been able to do that?
Absolutely, yeah. Well, the medical packs that I'll be taking personally, I'll take in the first batch will be several hundred packs. At the end of the project, if I can distribute enough aid, thousands of packs that even if 1 in every 2 or 3 people has got one, a tourniquet, a chest seal, Israeli bandage, sometimes it's tragic to see someone die from injuries that could be prevented in the Western Army. The pracs that I'm providing are actually from the US military, so, or from a supplier that supplies the US military. I'm funding it from, not myself, but through donors. So it is good quality equipment. It will go straight to the front line as soon as I arrive there, because that's exactly where I'm going. So yeah, I think the Kurds, who are doing so much, not just for themselves, but for the world, they deserve the best. They deserve everything we can give them. It's a shame that just a British man and his friends are doing so much to help, or trying their best to help, but it would be so much better if Britain, if America, if the West actually started supplying the equipment that the YPG needs. If you're going to analogy, like Winston Churchill said during the Second World War when he was fighting against fascism in Europe, he turned to America and said, "Give me the tools and we'll do the job," sort of thing. I can't remember what the exact expression is, but it's exactly the same message that the YPG is giving to the rest of the world now.
So just going back to the British government and the British airstrikes, do you think they have been effective at the moment?
I don't. I think David Cameron did everything he could to get this through Parliament, and he made out that this was going to change the war against ISIS, that we were going to be stepping up and doing our part. Now, what he should have known then, and what people need to have told him, and I certainly was banging this drum, that just a few air strikes and just a few bombs is not a strategy, is not a replacement for a coherent and cohesive strategy to destroy ISIS. For me, the bombs, I actually don't, there's nothing controversial about it personally. I don't mind a few dropped bombs on a few jihadis and a few dead jihadis. It doesn't hurt the fight, but it really isn't helping that much. One thing that I've been saying recently is in the last operation I took part in, we liberated 1,200 square kilometres of land. The YPG killed 550 ISIS fighters in just 2 weeks, or less than 2 weeks. And that's what the YPG did in 1 week. And in the past month, the British government has had 10 airstrikes on ISIS positions, probably expended millions of pounds doing that. That money would be better spent buying supplies and giving it to the YPG. And also, because there's bombs and there's bombs, at the moment they're hitting infrastructure, absolutely fine, there's nothing wrong with that. Hitting Jihadi John was something that was, again, I welcome. But at the end of the day, they're just slicing away at the problem. If we're going to do airstrikes in Syria, what we really, really need to do is work with the YPG on the ground, with the Syrian Democratic Forces, and hit forward positions. So as the YPG is moving forward and taking back land, we need to be basically bombing the machine gun nests. We need to be hitting the communication centres to save YPG lives, basically. But then again, we also need to be supporting the YPG as well, because airstrikes go hand in hand with ground forces, basically.
As someone with affiliations to the Conservative Party, how do you view David Cameron's relationship with Turkey, and obviously in relation to Turkey's attitude towards the YPG and the PYD?
I think David Cameron, at the end of the day, is a domestic Prime Minister. He doesn't really care too much about what's going on in the rest of the world. His long-term legacy, because he's already said he won't run for a third term, is he wants to be seen as a safe pair of hands, someone who inherited a very bad economy from the Labour government and who rejuvenated it, who turned it around. So he's the middle-of-the-road politician. What we need now is a leader, someone who can actually say, a leader with an international sort of passion and an international morality, in the sense that people are suffering around the world and we should be supporting the right people. So it's frustrating to see a Conservative Prime Minister, or any Prime Minister or British Prime Minister, rolling out the red carpet to foreign dictators, to foreign countries of very dubious sort of, I suppose, their own foreign policy and how they treat the people in their own countries. absolutely terribly. To have the red carpet rolled out for these people is very hard to see. We've seen it recently, the red carpet was rolled out for China. Every other week we've got people coming in from Saudi Arabia and other places as well. And the relationship that David Cameron's got with Turkey is one of, I think Britain is the second largest importer of Turkish goods after Germany. Millions of British people go on holiday to Turkey every year. So it is a huge part of the Turkish economy. It's a big part of the British economy as well. And David Cameron at the moment, that's his main priority, is sorting out the British economy, and he's not focused on the people who are horribly persecuted in North Kurdistan and within the Turkish borders, and he's not too interested, or at least he's turning a blind eye to the instability that Turkey is causing to the region at the moment. Its funding of extreme groups in amongst the FSA, its policy of attacking the Kurds in every opportunity they can get, and also actually assisting the Islamic State against the YPG. The British it's well known in the British government. I've already spoken to them about this. They've shifted in comfortably every time I brought it up. They haven't. What they seem to admit, the only thing they're willing to admit, I should say, is, and this is a direct quote, is that Turkey turns a blind eye to ISIS. And they turn a blind eye to the equipment and the funding that comes from Turkey to ISIS. And every time I've tried to pin them down, I've said to them, look, if the Turkish state has an incredibly strong security apparatus. Years of fighting the Kurds or persecuting the Kurds has meant that they've got a very well-oiled security machine, let's say. If the security services are turning a blind eye to ISIS, how far does this go up the tree, sort of thing? It has to go right up to the president, basically. That's just common sense. We know that. And every time I've mentioned it, they've just it's not in our interest, or it's not in our it's not something we're concerned about, worrying about how much Erdogan knows about the support that Turkey's giving to the Islamic State. So it's denial, basically. It's simple denial, and it's ignoring the facts, which is intensely frustrating.
Let alone that affecting the Kurds. Do you not feel that David Cameron should see Turkey's, let's say, tacit acceptance of ISIS, or turning a blind eye to their actions as a threat to the British public's safety?
Absolutely. Well, we've got to be absolutely clear here that Turkey sees the enemy number one for Turkey is Kurds. At the end of the day. Enemy number two is Assad, and enemy number three for maybe down the line is the Islamic State. The project and the revolution that's going on in Rojava, the Turks would rather see all of Syria burn, basically, than allow the Kurds in northern Syria to get a voice and democracy and freedom. And he would do anything to stop the revolution and to frustrate it. In fact, he's even gone as far as say that they will militarily intervene if the Kurds get any of the rights that they're fighting for now. So what he's really doing, though, because it's almost as if, and there's good in this as well as there's bad, that the revolution, in my view, is almost unstoppable. You cannot keep a people down. And the amazing things that the YPJ and G has done to liberate Rojava, all the peoples of Rojava, is making an impact on the world. People are seeing it, and they are taking note. My meetings in the Carlton Club and other places is an example of that. So the world is wising up to the reality on the ground in Syria, and Turkey is finding itself alienated. They're finding themselves left out of the conversation. They're finding themselves increasingly treated like the bad guy, which they are in many respects. So, but what he's doing, though, is he's extending the war. He's making it much more difficult for the Kurds to liberate and to bring peace to Syria. And in the time that the war is extended, how many more people will die? How much more funding is going to get out to international terrorism around the world? So there could easily be, in the next year, 2 years, terrible attacks done on British soil, attacks that could be avoided if the war is brought to a close in the next year or so, or if they were working with the Kurds and working with Britain. So it's just a knock-on factor. Everything that Turkey seems to be doing at the moment is jeopardising peace and freedom in Syria.
You mentioned the Rojava Revolution and your time spent there. Looking at your past as a conservative sympathizer or affiliate, what was your view of the ideological foundations of the resistance and the struggle there? Because that was something that was very much overlooked in the Western media. The effect of Kurdish leader Abdullah Öcalan ideologically on the resisting forces, especially the PYD and the TEVDEM, Democratic Society Movement, and the fighting forces, the YPG and YPJ. How did it affect you ideologically?
In a big way. One of the things that the West doesn't realise is what the Kurds are fighting for. There's a lot of ignorance amongst British politicians, amongst journalists, about the sort of society that the YPG is fighting for and that the people of Rojava want. At the end of the day, the revolution is about secular democracy. It's about women's rights. It's about freeing people after years of oppression. And the ideas of democratic confederalism is a new way of thinking, is a new way of doing things. In the past, in the Middle East, we've seen dictatorship, many dictatorships. We've seen democracies, which are dictatorships of the majority, where minorities are persecuted and which also provokes conflict and all the rest of it. A classic example is Iraq. The Americans introduced an American style of government. What it really did was put the Shias in control. Years of distrust amongst Sunnis and Shias, a lack of power sharing. The poverty in Ramadi, or at least unemployment, was running at 80% prior to the rise of the Islamic State. Extremism and nationalism and all the other nasty isms tend to get fueled by poverty, people who no longer believe in their political system anymore. So the fertile ground of ISIS is left by that. What the Kurds are showing to the world, or at least what the democratic confederalism shows to the world, is that this revolution is about individual liberty. This is all about freeing everyone and actually saying that the future of Syria is going to be a federated state whereby everyone will have a voice, whether you're a Christian, a Yazidi, a Kurd, or an Arab of any sort of belief. So, yeah, I think me personally as a conservative, I'm a bit of an odd conservative in many respects. I've got deeply, from a British perspective, I believe in the abolition of the second chamber, of removing the House of Lords, of renationalising the railways and all the rest of it. So I've got very, from a purely UK perspective, very left-wing Labour principles, but also some conservative principles as well. What really fuels me though is the idea of the individual, basically. I don't like a large engorged state. The best person to run my life is me, basically. And the beauty of democratic confederalism is it is all about that. It's all about liberating the individual, giving everyone a voice, and actually taking power away from the government and putting it down to the people where it belongs. And so it's been inspiring the past few months, learning about democratic confederalism, learning about what the Kurds have long believed, and yeah. My politics is constantly evolving. It's as I'm getting older, as I'm getting wiser, it's been a real learning curve, and I'm starting to see, and the YPG and the Kurds are starting to show that the future of the Middle East, that there is another option, basically. There is another way. It doesn't have to be dictatorship. It doesn't have to be flawed democracy. There can be a way of bringing peace to everyone and actually bringing democracy to everyone, and that's through democratic confederalism.
Just a knock-on question from that. The Kurds are trying to repel attacks by the Turkish state in North Kurdistan, southeast Turkey, and they are resorting or having to resort to the fighting tactics of the Kurds or the other forces in Rojava. So the Rojava revolution, in that sense, is spreading. What do you think about the future of the struggle in Turkey against the Turkish state, but also against the status quo? and the struggle for the recognition of Kurdish identity, the Kurdish nation across the 4 parts of Kurdistan. As you said earlier, the British government historically has an important role to play in the Middle East, and the separation, the division of Kurdistan into 4 nation states, and indeed nation statism in the Middle East is almost a Western product in that sense. What do you think the struggle in North Kurdistan will do?
I think the role that Britain had historically, and the fact that Kurdistan, there was an opportunity to create a united Kurdistan all those years ago, that really was a tragedy. So much could have been, we could have a democracy right in the centre of the Middle East now, and it would have been there for years. It would have been an example to the Middle East of the sort of societies that we want to see and live in. I think, though, that there's been a revolution going for a long time within the Kurdish, amongst the Kurdish people. The first significant step in my view was the liberation of South Kurdistan post-2003, the removal of the dictator Saddam and sort of the autonomy that South Kurdistan achieved. There's so much more work that needs to be done there, of course, but at least that was the first stepping stone. The next big stepping stone was the revolution in Rojava, and this has been really the defining moment. This is when Kurds have united amongst all the other groups in the region and actually started showing showing off democratic confederalism, basically, as an example of peace and unity, and actually achieving what we want to achieve in Syria, and that's peace and an example of what we hope to see. So the second part of the revolution is Rojava. The third part is the liberation of North Kurdistan, but that comes later. That's going to be in the future. We're in the middle of the revolution for Rojava at the moment. I think this is a difficult one because it's hard for me to predict. What I've been inspired by recently is the declaration of sort of autonomy in North Kurdistan recently. This is almost like the Kurds' Philadelphia moment. This is almost the moment when, like American independence, where people actually have stood up and they're calling for the rights that should be universal. That is a basic human rights, and that is autonomy. That is the ability to choose the life that you want to lead. I've got a feeling, though, that the revolution in Turkey is going to come about by peaceful means. At the moment, it doesn't feel like that. Of course, they are resorting to they are having to resist the oppression that they're suffering under at the moment. But what I'd like to see, though, is Turkey to realise that it can't keep the Turkish people down. That this cannot keep going on, and I want the world to realise that as well, and put pressure on Turkey to change. And I think hopefully it will come in bits. So. Yeah, there's something wonderful happening in Kurdistan at the moment. Kurds are being inspired by the YPG and the YPJ. Kobani was a significant moment. Being surrounded by such hate and evil and actually rallying together and liberating themselves was just inspiring, not just for the peoples of Kurdistan, but the whole world. It was certainly inspiring for me. So I don't know, for me personally, I don't know what direction that the revolution is going to take in the next few months, but I'm certainly happy with the progress so far, and I'm just looking forward to getting back with the YPG and continue and being there with the YPG as it sets that benchmark, as it shows Kurds what they can achieve if they just work together and if they fight.
Many people call the Rojava revolution a women's revolution. Why do they call it a women's revolution?
Well, it's the YPJ particularly are an incredible group, because so much is said in the UK. I can remember they've just recently allowed women to start fighting on the front line, and it was controversial, even amongst a Western democracy, that we think that we're so advanced that we've shocked ourselves that women can not only sort of vote and all the rest of it, they can also fight for their rights too. It's been going within Kurdish society for years. So in many respects, it's not, and in a region as well that's not famed for its for women's rights. It's not the revolution of Rojava is not just an example for the Middle East, but it's actually, what I'm trying to say, an example for the rest of the world as well. It's my own personal experiences of being on the front line, and you're part of a tabor that does have a YPJ element. So I fought alongside the girls, and there's one moment that I've often told people about when I was pinned down outside a village. And honestly, I couldn't get any lower to the ground. I was digging a trench with my nose because the bullets were hitting the ground around me, and I was convinced that any second now it would be my last. We'd been pinned down, and ISIS knew it as well. They were screaming Ali Akbar, they were whistling at us, they were jeering us, thinking we've got them pinned down and they're all dead, we'll kill them all. And I was firing back, and I was scared, if I'm honest. And I turned to my left and I saw a YPJ girl stand up with an RPG. And this is a hail of bullets. There are bullets everywhere. It's a tornado of gunfire coming down on us. And she stands up and she fired the RPG and smacked into the building that the bullets were coming from. And then she dived down again afterwards. And I thought to myself, oh my God, this is a girl who's half the size of me standing up and fighting back. And her face was literally almost probably enjoying herself, fighting back. And this is the character of the YPG, of resistance, of the same belief that obviously the YPG has, and actually this desire to liberate Rojava. So it's a defiant spirit, and you've got to remember what we're fighting against here, an ideology of hate that not only will barbarically destroy the cultures of the Middle East, but will oppress women to such an extent that they will become lower than animals within their society. And this is, and to see that defiance of that young girl in the RPG, and the defiance that I saw every day when I was with the YPJ in Rojava was just incredible.
So basically, the borders really, what are we, 2015? It's almost 100 years since the Sykes-Picot, and the borders of Iraq and Syria basically are sort of seem to be dissolving. How important are the Kurds in developing a democratic, secular future for the Middle East, do you think?
Massively important. As I said before, and as I think I said earlier, that democratic confederalism is the third way, basically. That we've gone from dictatorships of the minority to dictatorships of the majority in certain American-style democracies. And if we're looking for a future, it's almost like a blank page, as it were, because Rojava, because they've been long persecuted by Assad, the rise of the brutal Islamic State was just obviously was a terrible thing. But it wasn't like the beginning of persecution for the Kurds. Basically, this is just another thing of a long line of atrocities that have been committed against Kurds, whether it's Saddam's gassing or if it's Turkish brutality and all the different genocides over the years. So, but it's not the terrible things that happen to you. It's how you react to them that counts. And the revolution in Rojava and the spread of the ideals of democratic confederalism hasn't just inspired the Kurds, but while I was there, the 6 months that I was there are, I think at one point 20–30% of the YPG was made up of Arab members. I fought alongside Christians. There's one particular scenario, one case, what happened when I was fighting in a Christian village that I wrote about in an article for the Jerusalem Post, was when I went into a building and there was a Christian cross on the wall, and a Kurd came in behind me, and he saw what I was looking at, gazing at the wall, and he took out sort of Muslim prayer beads and showed me that he was a Muslim. And then the next Kurd that came in pulled out a Christian cross. So two different people of two different faiths fighting in a Christian village to liberate it against a fascist, vicious ideology of hate. And it was quite an important symbolic moment for me, because what united those two people wasn't their religion, it was democratic confederalism. It was a shared set of values. At the end of the day, you can be the beauty of democratic confederalism is because it's so much about individual liberty and about community, is that you can be a conservative Muslim and believe in democratic confederalism. You can be a very liberal Christian and believing it too. The beauty of the system is it gives you your rights. A Christian village can sell alcohol if they want to. It's their choice. But in a conservative Muslim village down the road, they can ban alcohol. It's their choice. It's their community. So the ability to build bridges, the ability to build trust, is an incredible thing. So. Yeah, so Rojava is it's an inspiration, not just for Rojava, but for all of the people of the Middle East.
Okay.
So recently, Shilanos Çelik was convicted of trying to join the PKK in a British court. How do you view her conviction, and also what do you think the British government should do in terms of the PKK being listed as a terrorist organisation?
Well, I think Shilan's case was flawed justice, in my opinion, because it was frustrating. Because what message does it give to the world and to the British public, in the sense that we're fighting ISIS, and here is a young girl who believes in democracy, she believes in many of the values that we have in Britain and in the West, and she's wanting to fight against the Islamic State. They got her on a technicality. It's the reason the PKK is on a terror list in Britain and America is historical, and it's political. It's not to do with facts. By no sense of the word is the PKK can be defined as a terrorist group. This is a revolution. This is the revolution of ideas and a natural expression of a people who are being oppressed. They threw the book at her in her particular case. So it does sadden me, but at the end of the day, I am a realist as well, so I do understand why they did it. And I know how they were able to capture her in that sort of net, as it were. But I would hope that they would wise up to the fact that it's in no one's interest to imprison someone who believes in democracy and is fighting against the Islamic State, the very people that you're supposed to be fighting against as well. In the PKK, I am a strong advocate that they need to be delisted. The future of Turkey and the future of North Kurdistan is in the hands of the people who live there, obviously. But what's very frustrating is that the biggest problem here is Turkey. It's not the Kurds. A famous line that I read recently is that is well known, is the Kurds are as prepared for peace as they are for war. That famous PKK, the general said it. So they are open for dialogue. They want to talk, but it's the Turks who are using the PKK to fuel nationalism sentiment in Turkey, to justify getting involved in Syria, to justify having another re-election, to floor the democracy in Turkey even more. It's the Kurds, any nationalist needs a bogeyman, basically, and the PKK is it. And Turkey will pressure Britain and America not to delist them. And at the moment, Britain and America are very focused on their economies. They're very focused on what they're doing, and they're not focused on internationalism. They're not focused on people's basic human rights and their expression of it. So what I would hope to see, if there's going to be peace in Turkey, is the release of APO. That has to happen. And then we need to delist the PKK, and we need to get Turkey and Kurds talking, dialogue. That so many offers have been made by the Kurds. The biggest problem here is the Turks. So we need to pressure them, and I want to see Britain and America do that. But hopefully they will soon.
Why have you decided to return now, and where do you think you'll be going once you've returned to Rojava?
Well, this has always been part of my plan, because this was never a gap year. This was never some sort of random thing that I did. For me, this is I've dedicated my life to the revolution in Rojava, and and going back was always part of the plan. Now, I suppose, because I've done a lot in the UK, or I've done as much as I can, and I want to take that fight to Rojava now. And I want to, there's also something selfish in me, in the sense that I want to be back with the YPG. That's where my sort of brothers and sisters are. That's where my friends are now. They're doing so much on the front line that I want to stand alongside them again and be there with them. and yeah, I've got a lot of projects going on, and it seems like the right time to go back, basically. The first place that I want to go is Kobani, because there'll be a media team that I'll be meeting in Erbil and assisting across the border, and I really want to show them the amazing reconstruction efforts of the city. One of the reports that I wrote recently was a report called The State of Play, Good Governance in Rojava, which the reason I wrote it was because of the ignorance amongst the Western media and amongst the politicians about what's going on in Rojava. People don't realise that the Kurds have taken on the systems of government. The vacuum that was left by Assad's retreating troops, the massive explosion of ISIS, was effectively filled by the Kurds. Kids are back at school. The doctors, teachers, everyone's being paid. The police are on the streets giving people parking fines and all the rest of it. One of the things that I was going to do this time around was invite my family to come to Rojava to visit me. It is that safe. I would often wander around town, into shops, buy products and all the rest of it, and feel totally safe. And that's at total odds with, let's say, an American soldier walking through Baghdad after the defeat of Saddam Hussein. So the Americans couldn't or struggled to bring peace and democracy and get schools running and the water flowing and electricity going after the defeat of Saddam. After the terrible things that ISIS has done to Rojava, the amazing things that the PYD, the unitary government has done to get Rojava working again has been inspiring. So yeah, going to Kobani and showing that is going to be an important step that I need to take, and that's something I really want to do.
With the amazing things that are happening in Rojava, I also watched a short documentary recently, and it's exactly from Afrin. It's exactly as you say. It is. Even people like us who are following it don't sometimes know exactly what's happening on the ground. Yeah. With the amazing things that are happening there, what are the amazing things that can happen here? What can, as a non-Kurd who's been out there, who's fought alongside the Kurds, what can you say to Kurds in Britain and Europe in general? What can they do in 2016 especially to further this struggle, to strengthen it, to embolden it? How can they support them? You know, the weaknesses that you've seen and possible remedies or things that you would want to see happen in the West?
Kurds are doing so much in the UK. That's one thing that took me by surprise. The moment I got back, I was able to meet fellow Kurdish activists. I was able to go to demonstrations and actually take part, basically, within the Kurdish community in the UK. What I would love to see more of, perhaps I'm thinking aloud now, perhaps create some sort of body whereby everyone donates a little bit of money to it and unify. Because I know a lot of people donate a lot of money to the rebuilding of Kobani, let's say, and to Kurdish charities. But more of a unified response maybe is something that we could always do better. Have a more coherent plan on how we can really assist the PYD. Ask them, and the YPG, ask them, what do you need? Do you need iPads at the moment? Do you need drones? Do you need medical packs? We'll try and raise $10,000 or $5,000 to pay for it. But that obviously needs a huge amount of effort to galvanise the Kurdish public in the UK. But yeah, I think maybe, so to answer your question more directly, perhaps so more of a unified response to assisting the YPG. Maybe more of an attempt to get British politicians on side. I've been working on a project called the Friends of Rojava, which is simply just building up a network of Conservative, Labour, Liberal Democrat MPs who support the revolution, who support the Kurds and want to assist them, just bringing them in, educating them and starting to move that forward. That's taken a bit of a back burner since I've started buying the medical packs, but it's something that's going to come back into the picture very, very soon. So yeah, there's always more that can be done, but I have to say, I kind of have to end it with this, that what people do, even in the UK, is inspiring as well. Yeah, it's been good to see.
There's a lot of misconception, there's a lot of misinformation, there's a lot of psychological warfare that goes on against the Kurds. It's quite difficult sometimes to to fight all those barriers and things that we have against us. And now we have Facebook, who Facebook are seem to be banning basically pro-Kurdish content. YPG and YPJ pages have been taken down by Facebook. How do you think, on the information level, how do you, what would you say is the best way to support the Rojava Revolution in terms of, you know, people like Facebook and people who want to generally sort of muddy the waters and give misinformation about the Kurds? How do you think is the best way to go about that?
Yeah, because that is one of the most intensely frustrating things, is that it's all politically driven. It usually stems from places such as Turkey. The Facebook question in itself is a problem. Turkey has long persecuted freedom of press, journalists, regardless of their nationality. They've imprisoned British men, Americans, and all the rest of it. They've expelled them from the country. They've shut down Twitter. They've threatened to do the same to Facebook. Facebook, which claims to have a moral stance to its business plan, I suppose you could call it, or their business, but it's intensely frustrated that they are regulating themselves at the desire of the Turks. That the Turks have simply said to them, "We'll shut down your business, or we'll tax you more, or we'll do this, or we'll do that." They've threatened them in some way that's just made them police very efficiently and very aggressively any sign of Kurdish identity. The PKK flag, for instance, is banned. The Rojava flag has been banned. I've seen friends who've taken it down. I've lost my account. When I was first there, I had photographs up of what I was doing. I had interviews that I'd done up. I had pictures of friends. And my message has always been the same. It's always been one of dialogue, of peace, of resisting the Islamic State. It's been pretty, in my view, uncontroversial. But to have me shut down and to lose the 5,000 followers that I had built up in that time was intensely frustrating. It was a setback for me as I wanted to express myself online. I had to rebuild that, and I know countless other Kurds and other Westerners who support the cause have suffered the same fate. So I would hope that people lobby Facebook. I hope Facebook realise what's most important. That if I could make it in a term that maybe they'll understand, that Facebook, what's cool is freedom of expression, is the ability to talk and express yourself. That's what Facebook claims it's all about. If people around the world start thinking that Facebook isn't about that, then people are going to lose faith in it, and they're not going to use their service. What's more important to them should be their integrity, and shouldn't be profits coming from Turkey, basically.
Especially from a president who now thinks that Hitler
exactly.
was a good presidential system.
Facebook aligning itself with such a regime, or at least bowing to it, is just, it doesn't look good on them at all, and it's not in their interest. So for their sake, for the Kurdish cause, and for everyone's sake, I'd hope that they take a look at their policies and actually change a little bit more. One thing I do want to say is that the Kurds do have a right to speak out, and if there's anything that people can do in the UK, is the spread of information, is educating people. I like to build a bridge between, because sometimes obviously the Kurds are very educated on what's going on in the country, but if you put the average Joe on the British streets, any average Joe is not that well educated, so trying to include them as well is important. So social media can be a great tool that we can use to advance the revolution.
Okay, Mason. Heval Baran, thank you very much for the interview that you did for us today.
Thank you.
We wish you all the luck with your project in Rojava.
Come back in one piece. That's the main thing.
Exactly.
I promise I will.
And say hello to Jack.
Will do.